last performer is an amazing writer, storyteller. He's making a return appearance here at Shine. He is also an educator and the creative executive and co-founder, chief creative officer as well at bigSTORY, which applies storytelling to business communications and innovations. Please give him a big round of applause and a big welcome to Mike Bonifer.
The Rev died last month. Reverend Russell White Jr. of East Orange, New Jersey, was the founder of Eagle Flight Squadron. 30 years before his passing, he had been in addition to the pastor at the First Baptist Church of East Orange, he had been a truant officer part-time, and he had been standing outside the high school, and these kids were skipping out of school like rats off a sinking ship. And his frustration was not so much that the students were skipping out of school. His frustration was some of them were the best and the brightest of the students, and they weren't learning anything in the school. They were getting socially promoted, but not learning anything in the classroom. So he stopped 3 of these kids one day, and he was at a loss for how to get them to go back into class because he knew that there really wasn't anything waiting for them back in the classroom. And as he was thinking about what to say to them, a plane flew overhead. And the Rev had his pilot's license, didn't have a plane, but an idea came to him, and he said, I'll tell you what, you go back into the classroom this afternoon, and have any of you ever flown in a plane before? No, Rev, no. He said, I'll tell you what, you go back in, and you get your teachers to sign a sheet that said you were in class all afternoon, and I'll take you out to the airport. We'll take you up in an airplane. Whoa, Rev, wow, really? Yeah. So the Rev didn't know where he was going to get an airplane, but these kids show up. And he had spent the afternoon out at the Essex County Airport hustling the owners of the airport to let him fly these kids up in a plane. And he saw the transformation that came over them when they were up in the air. These chip-on-the-shoulder, hard-nosed children of the streets were putty in his hands when they were up in the airplane. And he said, that's it. That's the answer. I'm going to start an aviation club for the young people of East Orange. And so over a 30-year period of time, Eagle Flight Squadron taught 3,000 young people to fly. 3,000 of them got their pilot's license. 500 of them are in the aviation industry today. Today, they have a headquarters in a converted firehouse in East Orange, 4 stories. The ceilings are covered with model airplanes. They own 3 airplanes, Snoopy, Snoopy 2, and Droopy, 2 flight simulators. They've got a theater that has seats that are made of airline seats that have been bolted to the floor. They've got a black aviation, history of black aviation museum centered around the Tuskegee Airmen. They've got uniforms that the Air Force Academy has donated to them, hundreds of uniforms. Eagle Flight Squadron, it's a fantastic thing. So on April 5th, 1987, I wanted to make a movie about this. And I had a lot of interest from Disney and from Scholastic Productions. And so I was in Columbus, Ohio, staying with a friend on a farm outside of Columbus. And I was flying to New York City that day. And it was an important flight because we were going to meet with the Rev and James Earl Jones in James Earl Jones's dressing room in the 46th Street Theater before the production of his performance in Fences, which had just opened on Broadway a week earlier. So I woke up that morning, and April 5th, you would think, well, balmy weather in Columbus, Ohio. Well, 8 inches of snow, how about it? And I'm freaking. I'm going, oh my God, I'm like never gonna get out of here. And my buddy drives me through, and we're driving through this deep snow, and I'm going, oh, I'm supposed to go into Newark Airport. I'm going, how are we ever gonna get out? The plane's not gonna take off. Well, everything slowed down enough that I was able to get on my flight. I breathed a huge sigh of relief. I'm gonna get to Newark, gonna get in time to see the Rev and James Earl Jones, the meeting of these 2 great individuals, and we're gonna do the deal. And so we're out somewhere over Pennsylvania on this airplane, and the pilot comes on and says, there's storms up and down the eastern seaboard. The Newark airport is closed. We've been diverted to Albany, New York. I'm like, no, this is going to be my great opportunity, and it's going to go, it's not going to happen. I'm going to miss it. Things are going to fall apart. So sure enough, we get diverted to Albany, and we're there on the ground in a blinding rainstorm, along with 11 other flights that have been diverted from up and down the East Coast to wait it out in Albany. And I am tense as can be. And a man comes up to me, a man named, who was on our flight, a man named Jerome from Ohio, comes up to me and he says, hey, I'm going to rent a car and drive down into Manhattan. I'm going to take the New York State Thruway, and I'm going to drive down. You want to ride with me? So I said, yeah, I'll ride with you. And I'd never been on the New York State Thruway before and never driven that part of the state. So he goes, get your baggage off the plane, get the baggage handler to go out and get your bags. I'll meet you out front with the rental car. I'm like, great. So rain is still coming down, and I get the baggage handler who's drenched, and I give him my claim check, and I ask him to go out to the plane and get my bags. And so I'm waiting, and a woman, a flight attendant, who was not a flight attendant on our flight, comes up to me while I'm waiting, and she goes, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And I look at her, she's tall, maybe 6 feet tall. She's got the little wings on her lapel, and she was firm about it. She had some conviction about it. It was a simple statement, but very convincing. And I go, yeah, she's right. She said, you know, you're the first flight on the ground. You're going to be the first one to take off. If you wait, you'll get to Manhattan before you will if you drive. So it just made sense to me. And so when the baggage handler came back in the pouring rain with my bag, I said, change my mind, take it back out to the plane. He's like, oh, you son of a, you know, and just taking it back out to the plane. Then I had to go around and meet Jerome in the front of the airport, and Jerome's jumping in, and I'm like, no, I'm not going. And he's like, you son of a, driving off. And it happened just the way the woman said. We were the first plane to take off. I got into Manhattan from Newark, got in to the 46th Street Theater, and James Earl Jones and the Rev had their meeting. And they did not get along. James Earl Jones got right to the most sensitive part of the Rev psyche, which is, how do you and your daughters get along? Because he's spending all this time with these kids, and he was neglecting his family, or at least he felt that way. So I was like a spectator watching two bull elephants go at it. I didn't feel in any particular jeopardy, but I didn't think these two elephants were going to join the same circus. It was not going to happen. So we wrapped up the meeting. Everybody went their separate ways. James Earl Jones went on to this great run in Fences. Denzel Washington is making the film today of Fences. And I got back to the Newark airport that evening, flew back to LA, slept in my own bed that night, woke up the next morning, and as is my habit, first thing I did was open up the LA Times and looked at the front page. And on the front page of the LA Times was a story about the collapse of a bridge outside of Albany on the New York State Thruway. 10 people died, one of them a man named Jerome from Ohio. And I said, who was that woman? Who was that woman that heard that story and came up to me and said, I wouldn't do that if I were you? And it has stayed with me all these years. And I have to tell you something that happened this week. I was in Lyon, France all week. I got in from Paris a few hours ago. And Wednesday night at a dinner in Lyon, a group of us were together to work on a project. We were meeting each other for the first time. And we were sharing stories. And one of the people that was at the table was tall African-American gentleman named Russ Barnes, retired Air Force colonel, and he heard this story. I told him this story that I just told to you. And I said, the Rev just passed away just a month ago. And he said, let's make that movie happen. He goes, I worked in Strategic Air Command. I worked in the Pentagon. I worked in DIA. He goes, I know a lot of people. He goes, let's make that movie. Let's get Denzel. And let's tell the story in honor of the Rev, and let's keep Eagle Flight going. And you know, I had a lot of time to think about it on the flight on the way back today, and I realized that we don't have any trouble finding angels. They're all around. They're everywhere. And all of us can be that. The challenge is for the angels to find us. And the way they find us is when we tell our stories. And so tell your stories. Share your stories as we have here tonight. And the angels will find you, I promise you, all my life. Thank you.